Hello and welcome to another episode of West Underground, the biggest, baddest podcast in the West and the number one music podcast in Sydney. Now, guys, this is a very special episode, and if you want us to do more of it, like and subscribe, and we will do as many as you want. But this episode is a review of the new Peter Jackson Get Back documentary, which is fantastic. And if you haven't checked it out for yourselves, go do that and then come back. Or if you haven't, stay with us and we'll have a chat about it. Now, this episode is extremely special to me because we've had a VIP guest for this episode, and that is Jack Hughes from the Grand Union. Now, I'm not going to say any more, guys. Enjoy the video, like and subscribe, and see you next time. Hello, Jack. Have we got you there?
Hey, Hamish. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, man, I'm doing well. Now, did you watch the recent Beatles documentary, The Get Back?
I have, man. I've watched it a couple of times. So there's just a barking dog behind me. Ringo, shut up. Yeah, man, I've watched it and I love it. Absolutely love it.
Now, is your dog actually named Ringo?
No, it's not. It's not even my dog. And the owners will be very disappointed with me when they see I've stolen their dog.
Oh, man. But now, what did you being from Liverpool and a Liverpool patriot, what did you think of the documentary? Do you think it did justice, or it's missed its mark a little bit?
To be honest, man, for me, I just see it as a big love story, and how for the last however many years, like the Beatles are spoken about in such high regards around the world, and rightfully so. And especially being from Liverpool, you see them as four lads from Liverpool who went and conquered the world. But when you're thinking about Get Back, I think it's important if you get back and you look at the timeline of what led to that point, what got us there. And from like 1966, when Revolver was released, the Beatles decided they were going to stop touring. And that was massive and I understand why they did it, because sound systems weren't where they were at. Beatlemania was too much and they needed a break. And that's when they decided to become a studio band. And then obviously after that, they created Apple Corps, which was a brilliant idea at the time. And they weren't making iPhones just yet. That's a different one. They made that, and then obviously everything is monetized, and not only looking after their own careers, looking after other people's careers and the business side of the business. And then unfortunately, their longtime manager, Brian Epstein, died literally the same year. And obviously he was spearheading everything, and then he was gone. George called him Mr. Epstein in the show. Their leader's gone, and then they all have to step up. So it's the conflict. You can already see things on the horizon of challenges that they were going through, that later on you find out, really why the greatest band of all time could be no more. And then for me, one of the biggest points is in 1969. Yeah. John and Paul both got married, not to each other. That would have been nice. But Paul got married to Linda Eastman, and John got married to Yoko Ono, who is the most divisive and polarizing figure in pop culture history. Someone that to this day, there's bands right now who have, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, maybe a little bit too around, maybe a little bit too involved, and taking that band member away from the process. And we call this the Yoko Ono effect. And then we get back.
Hold it there, Jack. This is for all the musicians out there, and this is for all you guys that aren't musicians but know somebody who is. Now, if you know somebody who's a musician and they're experiencing the Yoko Ono effect, they've got a girlfriend who's doing, getting way too much in their business, call the Yoko Ono helpline. Do them a favor and call the Yoko Ono helpline for them, or do it yourself. Cheers. Nice, man. I have to say, the one thing that I took from the start of watching Get Back is I found it exceptionally, like, to be honest, boring for like the first hour because I was
You're kidding me.
only because I'm used to the way that they structure documentaries, like
Okay.
you know
Okay.
what I mean,
Yeah.
like where it's like here's something, here's something, here's something, and they
Yeah.
just throw a bunch of shit at you and a bunch of different cut footage. But then after about an hour or so, I realized no, this is the fucking documentary. Like they're just
Yeah.
living it as if there's a camera in the room, like any band around the world. And then after I got that, I was just like, oh man, they're writing fucking great songs, but they're
Yeah.
killing as well. Like they're just hanging
Yeah.
out.
I think it's a funny thing because it removes the mythology of the Beatles because it's not. It goes from being John, Paul, George, and Ringo, four lads from Liverpool who are going on to take the States, and it's the mythology around them and people hearing bands for the first time. Chris Cornell saying he felt like John Lennon was his dad because he just kept listening to the Beatles all the time, and all these artists that have been inspired. The way pop culture changed because of them, and then you're just watching them decide what they want to have for the lunch is crazy.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the four human beings, we've made them these mythical creatures.
yeah.
Them asking for a cup of tea. But I understand what you're saying because as a documentary, you straight into it. It's them sat in a big sound stage,
Yeah.
just there being them. But how do you find the Beatles individually? What do you think about the Beatles individually?
I think like as people, I realize Paul was way more involved as a I always thought it was John Lennon who runs the band, and they have that little
Mm,
conversation. But secretly, I think it was Paul that was running the band from that, like, because I think Paul was always
yeah.
doing the back. He was the HR part of the band, right? He was the one who was doing like picking out who's going to be around the band, and then John
Hmm.
Lennon may have just been the force of being like, nope, that's what's happening, boys, and putting his foot down on certain ideas and being very,
Yeah.
forceful about saying, "No, this is how we're doing things." But I think Paul was out there talking and doing all the, what was weird too is I figured out that Paul was much more aware of his position in history than I actually anticipated. Like,
Okay.
did you realize that? Like Paul at that time, they weren't just like they weren't just going through shit and like this was their reality. Like Paul's a very rare, like aware that they are the biggest band in the fucking world,
To be a fly in the wall
literally.
in history.
Yeah,
That's that. Like I've got to give it to Peter Jackson, man. Like I understand. What was his name? Michael. Is it Lindsay Hogg, the director, the guy who's we're going to make a TV show. It's going to be a TV special. That guy,
yeah,
and he didn't even realize it, but he was creating content. Well, obviously, they had the show in mind, and it's going to be an album, it's going to be a behind the scenes and whatever. But that footage is more sought after now than it ever would have been at the time.
yeah,
Like when that was eventually released, that part of the footage and whatever, it it was just something that came out. Whereas because we've had to wait so long, it's it's like finding out about the JFK assassination.
yeah,
You've got your thoughts and feelings about what was going on and what happened, but to see minute by minute how the band was going and the direction they were going in is quite fascinating for me. Anyway,
yeah.
made me just it's just special, man.
I always thought that that John was the leader of the Beatles, and then
Mm,
Paul was second. But I realized it was kind of the other way around, and also I realized that John was tapped out during this. He's just he's almost like a fly on the wall of the Beatles. He's the I just felt like his involvement was fuck all in this documentary, because every time I was watching him, like you could see that there was a bit of conflict between like George and Paul, but then you also would see like Ringo would show up every day. Ringo was fucking keen. John's late every day. John doesn't say
mm,
a fucking word in this, barely. He barely speaks. And I just thought
man, he's got one leg out already.
Yeah, and especially like later on where he's taking meetings with the Rolling Stones manager, he's already got his eyes on the exit. One thing I found surprising was John Lennon post Beatles, where he was at every rally under the sun, and he was opposing everything, and he was as on the side of like the peace protests in the States with the Vietnam War. He was at the forefront of all that, and a lot of things going on in the world. John was right there. But I know in this, he does avoid confrontation. He doesn't like confrontation. And everybody knows that there's something not right between John and Paul, but they're just not talking about it. Yeah. They're doing everything they can not to talk about it. And when they're together, the spark is still there and they're still them. And they look like they enjoy it. But I feel like as soon as that's over and they go from playing together, there's that huge thing of they're not necessarily on the same page. And obviously they weren't. But one of my favorite things about the whole thing is where the writing and John's there and he's got his guitar and he's like, oh, I don't even know all the words to this. And obviously because it's just after the new year, and he has that moment and he goes, oh, Mel, grab a pen. And he's staring at his guitar and he goes, everybody had a hard year, good year. And then he just comes up with the lyrics, everybody put the socks, everybody put the foot. And he's literally writing the lyrics. And one thing I struggle about with being in my band with the Grand Union is the fact that when I'm writing, I see the Beatles in their lyrics and you hear them and you just go, oh my God, oh wow. But they didn't really necessarily put a lot of thought, time or effort into them, and I assumed they did. I just thought they did. But watching him just nod his head and go, yeah, that's the lyrics. I couldn't believe that. But at the same time, is it because they were that good at writing lyrics? They didn't need to fluff about with it for 6 months and decide on the day in the studio what phrasing they were going to go for. One thing that surprised me a little bit actually was the whole concept of the original documentary, right? Is, and we're going to play a show. It's going to be the Beatles' first live show in however many years. It's, and then Paul obviously is wanting it to become a live performer. He wants to be a live band again. Paul wants to be out there again. And I think they all kind of do really. But the pressure they put themselves under to go into a soundstage, come up with an idea for a show and write an album is ridiculous. They were that big that they didn't have to put that constraint on themselves. Yeah. It's not like they put that pressure on themselves. And that, again, like I was saying before, like, it's just adding little bits of fuel to the fire that they don't need. Yeah. And an interesting one is Ringo. You were saying before about you thought John was putting his foot down more and John was more involved. Ringo, I think, is kind of the shining light of this whole thing, is because Ringo seems to be the nicest, most caring man out of the band. The McCartney-Ringo relationship is a funny one to this day. People always go, oh, did they like each other or whatever? When Ringo says, I could watch him play the piano for hours, there's genuine love between Ringo and Paul. And he's like that with everyone in the band. But where Ringo doesn't want to go abroad and play the show, they as a band could veto any decision. And if they all didn't want to do it, they just wouldn't do it. Which is funny, really, because you think of it as John and Paul making all the decisions, but they allowed George, and I say allowed, like tongue in cheek, they allowed George and Ringo to make decisions that actually affected them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got that as well, man. Like, and I thought it's funny seeing the relationship between Paul and George. Like George knows that Paul's right about like, you know, things in the song, but then you see the like George's, you know, like ego is like, oh yeah, but I just want to play a little bit, you know, I want to put this here or
Yeah.
this here, and it just fucking. And I think any guitar player can relate to that, just wanting to overplay
Yeah.
shit. And like where the singer's like, can we just not have a guitar solo? And then there's one part where they referenced Hey Jude, and he's just like, do you want me to sit out like Hey Jude again?
Yeah, well,
Did you hear that?
George is quite he's quite ballsy, George. When it comes to them anyway, like George is just cheeky. But one thing I noticed about George is like I think he feels inferior to John and Paul because he's always been the little brother, you know, that dynamic of relationship, and he's playing in their band. But by this point, he's hanging around with Dylan, and he's, you know, he's friends with Eric Clapton, and it's kind of a funny thing, his relationship with Eric Clapton, because you know what he's talking. He's like, oh, you know, Eric can do all these things. I can't do all these things. You know,
Yeah.
That's quite a good George. I know to anyone who's not from Liverpool, they might think I sound like all four of the Beatles, but I don't. But that George impression was killer. But he's the way he talks about Eric Clapton, and then when you think about what happened down the line of Eric Clapton stole his wife,
Yeah,
you know, it's a bit of a funny thing. But George, man, I don't think anyone can watch it and think badly about George, because George for me he's the normal one. You know, he's just he understands what they're trying to achieve, but he sees it as a bigger picture of there's other things out there, not just the Beatles. You know.
yeah.
But I will say, when they were jamming All Things Must Pass together, and the three of them were singing on it, I was like, man, it's a shame that the Beatles never recorded that song. I mean, don't get me wrong, George on his own is amazing, but it is a shame. I think every song should have their three voices in harmony on it, man. Imagine.
Oh, man. Fuck. One thing, did you notice? One thing I took away from this documentary is George was the best dressed Beatle.
Oh my God.
He come into practice.
Does he have a pink turtleneck on at one point?
I can't remember that one, but the one that comes to mind is just him in these like fucking amazing fur jackets. And every time I see one, I was like looking up on my phone, where can I get one of these?
You know what's actually quite funny, man, and I wouldn't have ever thought about it, but you know, obviously what the crescendo, what we're leading to of the rooftop gig, right?
Yeah.
The clothes they wear on that is, I don't know. I live on the old David Bowie school of thought of you should never wear on stage what you arrive into the venue, right? And it's thought about as more of a, these are your performer clothes. That's not you anymore. These are your performer clothes. And the Beatles' iconic look in that performance, and they're just the clothes they were wearing to go to the studio in. Yeah. They're just their normal clothes. That's just what they were wearing, getting from A to B, you know? And I was amazed by that, because I feel like maybe some bands more than others and performers more than others put a lot of time and effort to what they're wearing on stage. And the Beatles they'd already done the suits for many years.
Yeah.
They just wanted to wear a big, comfy, fair coat.
But that's the thing. They like, I think for a lot of performers out there, it also becomes an issue of price. Like that jacket, that fur jacket would cost a fair quid, right? They have the money to wear that.
Well done, Hamish. Well done, Hamish.
You know, they would have the money to wear that all the time. Like if I had that kind of money, like that, I would do that. I would wear the fur jacket and wherever I wanted. I wouldn't
Think of
take
the
that.
animals, Hamish. Think of the
Uh,
animals. Think of the animals.
Yeah, well,
You pig.
well, look, I think Paul's daughter has a vegan fur company. I don't know how it works, but
Yeah,
I have to look into
good
that if
on
I
it.
get some good money.
Good on it. What's your views on George Martin in all of this?
I didn't really see what he was doing too much. I just saw him like wandering around asking questions and then then just disappearing. And half an hour later, oh, there's George Martin.
Yeah, because it's quite funny because maybe it was up until this point, but like, I had a conversation with Stu, my friend and guitarist, and he was saying maybe George Martin, because they weren't at Abbey Road, he was just out of his comfort zone, and they weren't actually recording an album at the time. They were just writing songs and seeing what would stick, you know. But he's still so involved, and you can see that they all trust him completely. But I thought, obviously, the stories of before, maybe it's just because they'd gotten bigger and they trusted their own judgment more. But George Martin was very much involved in everything. And I'd honestly like to know when that turned off and then maybe when it turned back on again in regards to the composition side of it anyway.
Yeah, well, I think he was involved in the even like little things that I've seen on YouTube. I think that's how he worked. He was like, boys, you go figure this out. Then when you come to the studio, I think we put strings on, because there was one conversation about talking about like strings and orchestras on different parts. And you only heard that briefly before it cut to the next thing. And I was like, that's where you come in. It's like the boys present an idea to you, and then you're like, yep, let's fill Studio 3 with a full London orchestra. And then after that, can we get some, concert violins in Studio 4,
Yeah.
I just saw that as more of, of the involvement.
Who's calling you, Ringo?
Yeah, Ringo, bloody hell. I'm trying to talk about you and you're giving me phone calls.
Oh, no, I'm really sorry about that, Percy. Yeah, for me, man, Mal Evans, he's the guy who I think deserves a bit of credit anyway for writing a few Beatles songs, because he's there, sat next to George and sat next to all of them, his little pen and paper. Maybe these should be the words, changing phrasing and whatever. Like he doesn't long and wide in the road, and that's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And he was the road manager, and he's a guy who later on in the show stops a few coppers from getting where they need to be, But I just like how anything they need, he's doing.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame because later on in life, they kind of said that his involvement wasn't really there, and he said he did more than he did and whatever. But watching that documentary, the guy is doing everything, unless, right, he was quite lazy, and they went, Mal, we're bringing a TV crew in, and he went, right, let's get a coffee in me, I need to look busy, the bosses are here, right? unless that was the case.
Yeah.
The guy is just everywhere. He's doing everything they need. And it's the legend of the Beatles is quite a funny thing, isn't it? Because I just imagine Paul and John, early days, in Paul's bathroom, writing songs to the right acoustics, and then them going in to record with George Martin and Ringo and George learning the songs on the day,
Yeah.
And then later on, they've got that many things going on around them, and there's a guy there, right, whatever lyrics they need, and it's, I don't know. I think there's actually some people who could honestly do with not watching the documentary. because if you want them to stay as this mythical thing, then it's how normal they are, you know?
Yeah.
It's like we're coming up into Christmas season now. If you seen what Santa Claus was doing for the rest of the year, would you be that interested in him? I don't know, because he's definitely real, let me tell you. You know, I feel like sometimes, although we now, I feel like it may have always been there, but right now, our generation and the way the world is, we've got such a need for content.
Yeah.
We've got such a need to have it right now, you know? And there's some things that you just don't want to know about. You don't want to know how the sausage is made, you know? And I feel like for a lot of people, it'll be quite a sad thing for them to watch, because they go from being these gods to just being four blokes from Liverpool who could pen a song, you know?
Yeah.
Write some amazing albums.
Yeah, I definitely see your point with that, because like I just felt like if you know, like if you were there, you would just be friends with them. You'd just be like, hey guys, you know, whatever, and you know just be yeah. It was just
they just be Paul, my friend Paul.
Yeah, it's my mate Paul that plays, you know, in this band, and you know, we're just hanging out on the sideline.
He plays the funny guitar. You know.
Yeah, he plays, but he plays it well.
As well.
Yeah,
he's not bad. I don't think he'll ever make any money out of it.
Yeah, man, I don't, and I, you know, and that George guy's a bit quiet, man, and that Ringo guy's really nice too.
Yeah.
But that John
he
fella,
should be a train conductor, that guy.
Oh man. But that John Lennon bloke, he's a bit moody. You never know if he's happy or sad when he's sitting in there and you know, very quiet, pondering his ideas. I think he's just.
How does he sleep?
How does he sleep, man? I don't know. I'll die imagining.
So what do you think of Yoko Ono?
Man, I think the worst, to be honest, with everybody that will go watch this, the worst 10 minutes of this whole documentary are when they cut to her singing with the Beatles.
It's just like jam, and Paul's like nodding his head, playing along, and he must be thinking, what have we got ourselves into?
Dude, when I saw that, I thought, fuck, man, I don't think, like, Paul has the patience of a saint. You know, like to sit through and jam while she's doing that to your song. Yeah. I felt anger for him.
It's a funny thing.
You know, imagine, like, you know, he's so nice. Like I think he was too nice to John, to be honest.
You know what is it's when she's reading the newspaper and they're all sat there writing, you know, the Beatles are there and she's just there sat next to them.
Yeah.
Not even next to the Hare Krishna fella. She's just there reading the paper.
Yeah.
And I could understand, you know, I feel like I've had a few band members that would be like, can you tell her? You know?
Yeah.
And nobody does it.
Yeah.
Maybe people were more polite then. But I seen an interesting thing, and it was about it was Paul talking about John the Yoko. Yeah. And he was like, you know, at the time it was annoying, but he met the love of his life and he just wanted her to be around him all the time. And you can't argue with that, you know. But if you meet the love of your life, she's not going to do the podcast with you, is she? You know,
no, man. Can I just ask you a question too? Like, the love of your life, do you take to work with you?
Oh, in here.
Exactly.
In here. Yeah, like, you know, I understand what Paul's saying. I think that's a really sweet way of saying it, and I get it. And like I said, man, I see this whole thing as a love story, you know. But she doesn't always need to be there.
No. I'm surprised nobody was like, hey, Yoko, here's like $20. Could you go get us some lunch or something while we figure this out? You know, just like bribe her off.
Yoko, do you want to go and scream over there?
Yeah.
Honestly, I watched that very, very hungover, right? When she was doing a scream. And I was like, this needs to stop. That was the only part I never enjoyed. That was the only bit I never enjoyed.
Yeah.
Just that little bit. But God bless her. But I've had a conversation about Linda, Paul's missus, and she's just the sweetest, most lovable human being ever. You know,
I don't know why Linda didn't go up to Yoko and be like, "Oh, Yoko, do you want to come do this? Do you want to come see my, just come this way a little bit more? Could you walk another 20 steps in this direction?
Yeah.
Go do this, you know?
Get out the way.
Yeah, and wander around like the Beatles housewives, you know, the real housewives of Liverpool, just wandering around outside.
Seeing all the sights.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a funny dynamic, isn't it? Because it's John's wife and Paul's wife, you know?
Yeah.
But for those who are so close, John and Paul, there's not much going on between the wives, whereas I thought there may have been, at least, you know?
Yeah.
Some kind of bond. Everyone's been away on a weekend away with your significant other's friend, best friend and their partner, you know?
Yeah.
With gritted teeth. Everyone's done it.
Yeah.
But no, she seemed really sweet, and unfortunately she didn't have the longest of lives. And I feel for Paul to this day. I feel like that was the love of his life, you know, and he's been in love after it, but that was the love of his life.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
That's poor Paul. Poor Paul. Poor Paul.
Like throughout this thing, man, I gained more respect from Paul McCartney out of this documentary. I just wish that there was people like Paul McCartney that were politicians, you know, like the fucking democracy, the patience, and the persistence of that man.
We've got a few politicians in England who say get back. And they have Christmas parties when they shouldn't as well. But you know what? There was a moment in it, and it actually gave me a moment of clarity, right? And it's when Paul's there and he's like, you know, I feel like I'm always the one telling you what to do. You know, I don't want to do this, but somebody's got to do it. I remember thinking, Paul's a bit of a bitch, right? Paul, he's doing this thing of, so when we talk about the Yoko Ono effect, it's you go home and your significant others, you know, maybe annoyed you, and then you're annoyed about the band, and then they're saying, you know, they don't realize how much you do for that band and how, you know, they need you more than you need them. You know what I mean? And then it happens all the time in bands. You played in bands, man, you know.
Yeah.
If someone comes in, they're a little bit down, they're saying their involvement is more important than anyone else's. And I have a friend in mind. He's my best friend growing up, Chris Bolton, right? And every time he'd come in and he'd give, you know, he'd be doing it, he was in a band now, and he'd be giving it to me about something, right? And I'd be like, Yoko Ono effect, this is what's going on. Because he'd met a girl. But after watching this, it's given me the clarity of, was I actually doing as much in that band as I could have been? You know?
Yeah.
The problem is with Get Back and where the Beatles were, is that Paul is all in.
Yeah.
And the rest of them are not all in.
Yeah.
George has got his eye on the door. John's got his eye on the door. Ringo never wanted to end.
Yeah.
But Paul is actually all in.
And that's the heartbreaking thing.
And to be in a band where not everyone is that committed as you, especially if you're the main songwriter or one of the two main songwriters, I feel like he was giving them an ultimatum by saying, we need to be out there again. We need to be a live band. And maybe none of them wanted to just, you know what I mean, bite the bullet and go along with it. One big thing about being in a band is managing personalities.
Yeah.
You know, and it's about managing them in the sense of when do they need an arm around them,
Yeah.
and when do they need to be told. You know, and I do not like being screamed at or told. I need, you know, the long run up approach to it.
Yeah.
They call it a director's sandwich, right? So you'd have notes. You're doing really great. Oh yeah, brilliant. And then the filling. Maybe you could just do it like this instead. Maybe you could, you know, maybe you could just practice a little more. Maybe you could be on time more. Maybe, you know, and then underneath, but you're doing great. And that is the director's sandwich.
Yeah.
You know, it's about being able to manage people's personalities. And I personally know I haven't been able to do it well all the time. And I know I've had my personalities managed. But Paul's doing the best that he can.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, this isn't, you know, a pub rock band. This is the biggest band in the world at that point, you know. But one thing, and this is something that when I seen it, and I don't know how you feel about it, when the guy comes around, the publishing guy, and he's talking to them about, you know, oh, and you bought these back catalogs, and you bought that, and oh, and so and so has done a cover of your song, and then oh yeah, great. Oh, right, should we go for lunch? And they don't know it at the time. But that is a massive, massive point in music, because they were so nonchalant about their own music. If I feel like that's the only moment in it Paul McCartney would have seen and went, I wish I would have paid more attention to that.
Yeah.
But they just assumed they were being looked after, you know, because they're the Beatles and they have all this power.
Yeah.
But a moment that if they'd have all been on it and, you know, being 4 businessmen, not 4 musicians trying to steer the ship, you know, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr and Yoko Ono and Olivia Harrison and the families would be a lot richer to this day, you know, if those issues never came up. Because that was such a pivotal thing. And I was watching it and I was like, someone listen to what he's saying. Someone, and none of them, you know, but I suppose if you've been hit after hit after hit after hit, it's like thinking, you know, you're a professional athlete.
Yeah.
And you get paid a big contract. And those contracts are always going to come. So you can spend as much as you want because you're always going to earn that, but you don't. And the reality is, you know, the gravy train will end. Oh. If you're an athlete, you'll get an injury, you know, your body can't do what it used to do.
Yeah.
You stop being able to write #1 albums and hits. Now, and then all that is just something that you never used to worry about and is now your reality. But the other thing we've got to remember is, man, is like, as important as this is and as good as it is that we've got to witness it, this is 7-8 months, or I think maybe close to a year and a half before the Beatles even break up.
Yeah.
You know? And George, right, that's it, I'm going. I'm leaving. Where are you going? I'm leaving the band. How nonchalant that is. And I'm watching that as a viewer going, no, George, come back. There's the point where they're like, what do we do now? And it's oh, well, if he doesn't come back, we'll just get Clapton in.
Yeah. Well, did you notice that George, I more or less thought George was a little bit of a bitch because, like, before that was the conversation of Paul going, I don't want to tell you this all the time, George, and then George then still packs up and has leaves for a couple of days. But imagine if Paul really ripped into him then. Fuck, the Beatles would have ended a year before.
Oh yeah. Well, that's another interesting thing. John quit, and then that was pretty much John quit pre Let It Be even being released.
Yeah.
And then Paul dissolves the partnership, and then Let It Be's coming out. And imagine like promoting the album, the death of the Beatles. They should have named that album. But that album in itself, like what's your favorite Beatles album?
The White Album.
Is it?
Yeah. It is. Oh,
2 people in the world said that. You and Charlie Manson.
Well, I don't know if it was Charlie's favorite album. He thought it was about the world, coming to an end. But I like the White Album. Like that's mine, because I think it was the first Beatles album that I listened to, and I was like, man, I can see how you guys are doing this. Like, it was like I could see almost the back end formula of it, and I was like, oh, this is cool, because it doesn't seem like quite, because there was just little songs on there that were stupid, that probably shouldn't have been on there. And on like especially the White Album, man, and I was like, yeah. Like this is the one I like, because it's the one I can kind of see that the engine's working.
The process, yeah.
And now every time I listen to it, it's just become like it. The more and more, it's just become my favorite thing, because it's not quite as polished as the others.
Yeah.
What about yourself? What's your favorite?
I don't really want to start the show. I thought you might like to know. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That Sgt. Pepper's, man, is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
It really is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And that is an album that's probably been my favorite album for 4 years.
Yeah.
That's my go-to to listen to album, And I feel like they couldn't do anything wrong, the Beatles there.
Yeah.
And John is equally as involved. It's competition is a very, very healthy thing.
Yeah.
Because it stops you being stagnant, and it stops. A big problem with a lot of bands is if one person is the driving force, that person's only got so many ideas, Whereas to have 2 of the greatest ever competing, not necessarily to have a better song than the other one, but to, that song was good, I need to, or my bit needs to be as good as what he's came up with this on this, And that album, and the track for me on that, obviously, what it ends with a day in the life, but She's Leaving Home.
Yeah.
And McCartney, I shift all the time on favorite Beatle. I do. And we had a conversation when my band, the Grand Union, did West Underground pod the other week about, you get to enjoy it all, and you don't need to have a favorite, because you can enjoy it all. And Paul, for me, like what everyone did post Beatles, what their music was, what they created. I think Wings, the Band on the Run album, stands next to a lot of the Beatles albums for me.
Yeah.
And that's because McCartney, like I say, McCartney he had a period there where everything he was touching was turning to gold.
Yeah. I got that.
And, like even on Let It Be, the fact Long and Winding Roads is on that album. That song is such a beautiful song,
Yeah.
you know, and Let It Be itself, man. Like it's
Yeah.
you know what I was actually looking for in the documentary. I'd always heard that John Lennon thought Paul wrote Two of Us about them two together, and the excitement on John's face where they're playing it, Two of Us, and these, you know, and the two of them are singing it together. And I would have liked for in that to be like, it's a good song about me and you, eh, Paul? And he's like, what? It's about Linda. And because I don't care what anyone says, that ended the Beatles.
Yeah.
That must have broken his heart when he found out that we're about to.
Oh man. Yeah, it that was one of the glimpses of when you could see Lennon come back to life a little bit in that documentary. I was like,
Yeah.
there was a little bit of spirit, like, you know, rejuvenated in him, and I was like,
Yeah,
that's a good moment.
but again, this is footage that's been in the hands of so obviously the original director Michael Lindsay Hogg, and then the footage got sold in I think 2016, 2017 to Peter Jackson. So I reckon on, you know, so we've seen 8 hours of footage. On the other, it's 60 hours total, isn't it? I reckon on those other hours, you know, Ringo's probably just like this on a bong, you know.
Oh,
And that's where he went, Octopus's Garden. But one thing I will say about Ringo is when he comes in and he's like, oh, I've got this, and he starts playing Octopus's Garden, right? And the smile on George's face. And he's like, you can see, he's like, that's really good.
yeah.
That's actually really good. And it's those dynamics that I like in it, because the two of them going nowhere must have always felt, you know, this is John and Paul's. And then when they got to do anything together, for the two of them, that must have been so good, man. Because they'd probably been together throughout over the years.
Yeah.
Because everything's always been John and Paul.
You reckon that like Ringo and George were at plenty of balconies over the years going, I wrote a song, and then Ringo's like, oh yeah, I wrote one too, and then they just bitching that their songs never got in the thing, and then
yeah.
God, I've wrote 5 songs and they don't want any of them.
Yeah. They're only letting us have one each on this album.
Oh yes.
You know what I will say though? It is a huge crock of shit, that the Lennon-McCartney partnership thing, right? Because you know the songs that neither of them have had anything, you know, like there's a lot of Paul songs and he's playing them to Lennon, and it's come up, you know, Lennon McCartney. And I think, no, he had nothing to do with it. But I mean, as a business model, it's probably, as the years went on, been great for the two of them, more so probably for John's family.
Yeah,
Paul's still been,
well,
obviously, after John got murdered. But
I think that's what's paying the rent for Yoko at the Dakota building.
I think Yoko's fine, man. I think she'll be fine forever. I honestly, it made me, I see Yoko a bit differently now to how I've seen her. She still loves him the way she talks about him to this day. You know, it's just, the fact, you know, we weren't alive. You know, we weren't alive when Lennon got shot. But imagine, who's the biggest band in the world today?
The sad thing is that there was silence then, and I can't tell you.
Yeah, because you don't know. You don't know, right? Okay. So out of that biggest band who you've just mentioned that you can't mention because who is it really? They're, you know,
The Foo Fighters?
They sing. Oh, it's not the Foo Fighters. I love the Foo Fighters, but it's not the Foo Fighters.
Well,
It's got to be a band who everyone agrees on, you know. And
Nickelback.
hey, we all just want to be rock stars. The idea that someone, and I know, like I was saying before, John was at every protest, and he, you know, he's doing everything he could to use his celebrity to help people. The idea that someone would just go and murder them,
Yeah.
you know, is nuts. And especially, we have a problem in our society today, in our generation, of main character syndrome, you know, with Instagram and all these things.
Yeah.
Like the Mark Chapman just went up and killed John Lennon, just killed him. And I'd like to know what his albums would have been like going on from where he was.
Yeah.
Whether he would have dipped, whether he would have, you know, released a dance album, and you know what would have happened if John Lennon would have went full tech. That's what I want to know.
I don't know, but I read Elton John's book recently.
Yeah,
And I think he may have followed into that a little bit, because there's part of,
I read the reviews on Elton's book. They say it's a little bit funny.
yeah, well, we'll do that. That's the next podcast.
Okay, go on, man. Sorry.
But dude, I definitely recommend it. It'd probably be just as good as if like you or I tried to write a book. I'm just glad that he, you know, it's his words and he's, you know, done it. I think it's worse when you get the ghost writers.
Did he write it? Did he write it, or did Bernie write it? Come on! Elton, if you ever see this, I love you to pieces. Elton, I love you to pieces. And Bernie.
Yeah,
these are jokes you're not going to find anywhere else, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh man, and the one, going back to the Elton book, there's one part of it where Elton's talking about how everybody used to go see John when in New York, and they would come over, like David Bowie, and when Elton would come over, they would go out and go to clubs and stuff like that, and go to. So I think maybe because he would go to the, you know, the bit of like the alternative clubs in New York. So imagine if you're going to those places and you're experiencing that kind of music, you would probably, there probably would be Lennon's disco.
To be fair though, as well, like obviously Yoko was an artist, and they lived in Greenwich Village in New York. That they were surrounded by art, you know, and Andy Warhol's of this world, and they were right in there. So I feel like he would have carried on making good music, you know, and even, you know, we lost George very early as well.
Yeah,
and I feel like those Traveling Wilburys albums, I love those albums, man.
Me too.
Because he looks like he's just having fun in it, and the way he talks about the Beatles in the documentary, he's like, you know, I see it as being more than just us. You know, we are, you know, maybe Dylan can join, and the Beatles being this big thing is essentially what he created in the Traveling Wilburys, you know?
Yeah.
Just like all the top dogs together having a little sing song.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just had one thought too as well, like that just came to mind as well. Like, I don't think Lennon would have released the disco album, to be honest, because he was around for it. Like, he was around for disco throughout the 70s. He would have seen the
Beatles, that's true. Actually,
and track and go down that road. And you know, he didn't participate in the Staying Alive era. You know, you know, go and with the documentary too. Were you sitting there going, "Oh, I'm looking at it like a very young John Lennon and Paul McCartney," and then after like thinking, fuck, after this you went and did da 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 da, you know, and just sitting there going, after this you moved to New York, after this, you take it pretty easy with life and put out a couple albums, and then to put a band to get an all-star band together, and then looking at Ringo and going, you go on to do the voice for Thomas the Tank Engine, just sitting there going,
the most successful of the quartet, if you ask me.
yeah, and just going like, wow. And like, we're just chilling with you guys, like we're just sitting in the in the background and going like, like just so much of history could have been changed, if you were able to become present in those moments and be like,
yeah,
George, stop smoking cigarettes. John,
Yeah.
don't move to New York.
yeah. John, stop pissing people off.
Yeah. Overall, would you recommend the Get Back documentary to your friends, or also to your friends who aren't musos? Like, I feel like, for me anyway, this is a documentary if you play music or if you've got that little creative bug, that it's definitely a watch. If you're not, it's probably going to be a very tough watch for you.
I actually agree with you, man. I think it's so I work with an Italian guy, like a very nice guy, right? Favorite band is Queen. Yeah. Earlier, he was I was watching Get Back. I was watching it for the second time. Obviously for doing this, but more for my own enjoyment. And this says what you've basically just said. I think fans of the Beatles will care about it, and they will care about it. Fans of music will care about it.
Yeah.
The average Joe, my mate Luca, for example, oh, that's cool, bro. He's Italian. This is how he speaks. He learned to speak English in the Northern Territory. For everyday people, they're not going to rush to watch it.
Yeah.
But for anyone who's in the arts or in music, it's, how could you not watch it?
Yeah.
When it was announced what they were releasing, it was a countdown in my mind till the 25th.
Yeah.
Literally a countdown, and it wasn't because that's when my brother's birthday is. It was because Get Back was going to come out, and we were going to get to see it.
Yeah.
Did it live up to your expectations?
Well, I didn't really have any particular expectations. Like, to be honest, I didn't go in there going, "Oh, I expect it to be like this." I hope,
Yeah,
but I think in hindsight, it did, because it made me just realize, shit, man, like they were just like normal dudes. Like you could just see that they weren't like, like manufactured fake, people. Like they were just genuine, dudes. Like I think that's one thing I took away from it. It's just like, I feel like if you met them, like even if you met Paul to this day, I don't think it'd be like, you could sit down in a room and kind of have a talk to Paul once you kind of got over the fact that he's Paul McCartney.
Oh my God, it's Paul McCartney! Yeah.
Once you had that moment, I feel like you'd be like, oh man, I actually, you'd be a decent person to sit around with.
Yeah.
Now,
I don't think there's any malice in Paul McCartney, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a bad bone in his body. I genuinely don't think there is. Go on, man, carry on, sorry.
There's other celebrities that you meet out there, right? And you could imagine that you wouldn't probably like to be in a room with them, with some of them, and you'd be like, you could imagine that they would be like how do I say the C word in a nice way?
See you next Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a nice way. Yeah.
And I just don't feel like they, maybe if you caught them on a bad day, but I feel like for the most part, yeah. And I think that was the one thing I'd take away from it, because how they say you never want to meet your heroes. I feel like then after watching that, I was like, maybe it wouldn't be bad.